Hello, dear friends. Today we will again talk to the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Greetings.
Igor Mikhailovich, here's what I would like to discuss with you today. The reality which a person faces in everyday life doesn't always make him happy. Indeed, people have a lot of problems and disappointments in life, lots of conflict or difficult situations of some kind in relationships with their relatives and friends, while sometimes this three-dimensional life is just so boring and routine, and if we talk about prospects for the future, sometimes they are not joyful either, so people refuse to interact with this reality. Moreover, they escape, yet the question is where they escape to. They often escape to fantasizing. And in the modern world, such an escape and such a form of fleeing has become so large-scale that scientists say it basically has a character of sort of a latent epidemic. It is said there is no harm in dreaming. Is it really so? And I would like to discuss whether mental images and pictures in our heads are dangerous or not, because it is one thing when a person, let's say, simply imagines some plan, he models something that he later implements here in life, creative activity and so on. But for the most part, in their fantasies, people end up in some places where they have never been, or where they possess skills they will never possess. What attitude should be to such things? When does this dreaming become pathological?
Well, generally speaking, the subject is really very serious. I would say, however ridiculous it may seem. Here's the first thing I would like to mention. You're saying that many people are involved in these games of consciousness and creation of
Alternative realities
for themselves in the literal sense of the word. But as a matter of fact, here, the numbers are frightening. Practically 100% of the population engage in creating alternative realities in their heads. Some people have prolonged processes. They create almost a real world for themselves in their heads. It's a virtual world, but it is real for them, and there are a lot of such people. However, there are sporadic, short fantasies where a person kind of participates. He decides something there, becomes the main character, and so on. They say, and some people may object, especially those who are connected with psychiatry or psychology, or those who simply consider themselves experts in the field of psychology, in the sense that mostly people who haven't achieved something in life engage in such dreaming. So as a compensation for the reality, they begin to fantasize and create an alternative reality for themselves, in which they are capable of something and do something. Well, friends, as a matter of fact, this is far from being so. Even if we take the powerful people of this world, they fantasize even more. Let's say the lower strata of our society engage in fantasies that are mostly short-term, such sporadic fantasies. For example, regarding one or another subject, and they almost never go back to the same fantasies. Even if they do, their plot is changeable. Meanwhile, the powers that be create illusions to the extent that, how to put it, it's like a movie, a TV series, or an alternative life, where they model and think everything over. Of course, there are all L's there, meaning they rule the whole world and that kind of thing. This is no joke. It is really so. Thus, in all of these pathological fantasies, perhaps the most frightening thing is that almost 100%, all of them involve negativity. That is, with rare exceptions, I emphasize, fantasies are more positive. Well, again, they are positive towards the dreamer. But if we look at it from an ordinary perspective, If their storyline were to develop in everyday life, there is a lot of negativity, where some scenes necessarily take place, some
Domination.
of somebody over somebody. But as a rule, the fantasist controls everything, decides everything, and so on. So your question is whether it is good or bad. It is bad. It is disgusting. Why? Because we waste our time, our life, and our attention on a fantasy, on this illusory world, in order to play out some fantasy. This, by the way, answers the question why gaming addiction is so developed in our society. As of today, gaming addiction is really a great trouble. Moreover, it doesn't matter whether a person gambles at a casino or plays some kind of an interactive game on the computer. A person becomes attached to it to such an extent that he begins to live by it. Therefore, it is all very serious. It's a function of our consciousness to create an illusion and involve personality in it. You know, the trouble is that personality doesn't distinguish. It really doesn't distinguish where a fantasy is and where reality is. Why? Any information that is presented to personality is paid with attention, the power of our attention.
By the way, many Holy Fathers actually said that it doesn't matter whether you commit a sin in thoughts or in actions, you should equally beware of this
Let's say
phenomena.
any action that we play in our head or commit in our everyday life, physically and for real, if it is sinful, it's a sin. Whether it's in one's head, in dreams, in fantasies, or it is indeed a manifestation. If it is sinful, it is sinful. Why? The answer is very simple. I'm saying again, personality doesn't distinguish whether it is reality or fantasy. Personality perceives our dreams as reality. Here's a simple example. With a rare exception, basically everyone has dreams. But it's just that not everyone remembers them. With few exceptions, some people simply do not remember dreams, but everyone sees them. Therefore, friends, most of you have dreams. In your dreams, you can very rarely realize that you are sleeping, can't you? That it's a dream. But you perceive everything absolutely realistically. And again, why can we realize that we are dreaming during sleep? It's an activation. Besides secondary consciousness that imposes this game on us, primary consciousness also begins to awaken, and that's where it evaluates.
The observer.
Yes, the observer from the position of primary consciousness, and not from the position of personality. In this case, personality as an observer generally accepts everything that is imposed on it. So,
When a person can already distinguish where a dream is and where he actually is.
right, if there is awakening of primary consciousness as an observer, in this case, a person can even control a dream and play. But it happens if a person, let's say, is so weak that consciousness manipulates him as personality, then he can do that. There are people who even learn to create controlled dreams, meaning they actually draw scenes. They fantasize in dreams, just like they do in thoughts. What for? In order to be a king, at least somewhere, you see? I mean, it's again a pursuit of the power of other people's attention. In other words, the only incentive that forces people to climb to the peak of power, no matter what slogans and what ideology they use. The only thing that forces them to go there is attention. The attention of other people. What makes people go to the mountains and conquer the unconquerable? Risk in their lives. Other people's attention. What makes people, as it is fashionable nowadays, on TikTok, on YouTube, and everywhere in social media, they post pictures when young people take risks. For instance, a person is hanging on one hand somewhere under the sky, on the boom of a crane. Or he commits some silly acts, standing on his hands at the edge of a tall building. That is, they risk their lives, not for the sake of a shot, not for the sake of attraction, but for the sake of attention. Although again, it's a stick of two ends. The more people watch him, the more views, while in fact, more attention is invested. But here, some people will say, it is invested where? Yes, in a digital record, but we already said many times before that modern technology doesn't break the connection. In other words, modern cameras, digital recording tie a person to the record to such an extent that it makes no difference whether you watch a movie or observe a person in reality. You invest your attention in his image, and this image feeds the person himself. The only thing we fight here for is the power of attention. Why? Because, pardon me, it's the primordial power, the power of Allat, which is intended for gaining life. If our everyday resource, so to say, what our body expends, we can call it prana, the energy of life. Then the power of Allat is a completely different source. It's the most precious thing available here.
That's interesting. Igor Mikhailovich, there is such a point. It turns out that very many people, those who daydream, start having problems with setting goals, so to say. They become disinterested in anything in this life because why would you acquire a certain skill, engage in self-development, let's say endeavor to become an Olympic champion during 10 years at least? If within 5 or 10 minutes you can imagine a scene in your head where you are on the top of Olympus, where everything is fine with you, you feel good and easy.
You know,
And a person doesn't see and doesn't feel the danger in that. As you have rightly said,
of course he doesn't.
he wants more all the time. After all, those images which came true for a person, to be honest, everyone who dreamed, everyone who is a dream addict, and let's say it is almost 100% of us, understands that those images which he once played already in several rounds do not come true. So this guaranteed pleasure that consciousness and the system promise to you does not exist.
It exists. I disagree
This way.
with the conclusions of those people who say that. Why? There is a pleasure. It's just a matter of allocating enough attention by personality. And in response to that, our brain produces dopamine.
Dopamine.
Yes. Each time you have to increase and make a more twisted plot.
And more time is spent.
And to increase the time.
Right.
Thus, not only attention, but also time has to be spent on it all. It just involves a person so much, like a game. You see? Like drug addiction or alcoholism.
Yes, exactly.
All of this is what destroys. All of this is what takes away your lives, my friends. These games in consciousness, in fantasies. Some people will say, what about thinking something over? There's a huge difference. For example, you need to calculate something. That's what your consciousness is needed for. You need to, I don't know, anything. Build a house. You need to make an architectural design to calculate, or if you are not an architect, but you just want to build a house, you can think over every detail. That's what your brain and your consciousness are needed for. It is really a tool for us to plan our lives. But if you are not going to build a house today, yet consciousness is telling you that someday you will earn money and will build the house of your dreams. Again, in social media and everywhere around, they talk and teach people that it's enough for you to fantasize, to dream,
Materialization.
and you will get that house. And they give examples of how a person thought, dreamed, and obtained exactly the same house. I'm not saying such things don't work. They do. But it is easier to win a lottery, you know, than to get a handout from the system. This is true. Sometimes the system allows it. When a person has paid so much that, well, this handout from the system is not worth it, you see?
You also said that it's actually not that easy to hold attention on this thought.
Of course, it's not easy.
Even what you wish for.
Okay, let's discuss why. Some people succeed in visualizing some material benefits, while others do not succeed, even though they spend exactly the same amount of time. The frequency of investment of your attention. In other words, this is magic, my friends, real magic, for which a person is deprived of life. And why is he deprived of his life? Because he wastes his power. This is indeed magic. In order for you to get a desired result in this material world, You have to cast away all other thoughts as far as possible. You shouldn't disperse your attention and should focus it precisely on the point of a desired object. For instance, if you desire a house, you must see it clearly. You must live in it, down to the smallest detail. Tell me, is it worth it? Do you want a house? Earn money and build it. If you don't have such an opportunity, do not fantasize. That's a simple example.
After all, when you take action, a completely different kind of energy is spent
Of course.
than when you dream.
When you spend power physically, or when you calculate something, you spend prana. Whereas when you dream, when you invest attention in a fantasy, you spend a lot. The difference is crazy. That power you can restore, for example, after having a rest or something else. Well, generally speaking, prana is also a reserve of, so to say,
Fuel.
it's a tank of gasoline that is given to you for your entire lifetime. Nonetheless, its consumption actually provides for all our life circumstances, except for the sinful ones. While a fantasy is a sin, in other words, you should not fantasize, like playing a computer game, right? Meanwhile, we engage in that. We talk to someone in our heads. For instance, you have touched upon the Olympics, right? If a person is keen on sports, if he enjoys sports programs, he will definitely put himself on the podium. For sure. I mean, he lives the life of those who are shown on TV. He looks at this image, the image of an athlete or someone else, and he literally deprives himself of this vital energy, of this very power of attention. Why? Because he really invests in his fantasy, which should be invested inwards, meaning that which can give life. And he doesn't turn it to God, but gives it to the devil. Well, I'm speaking in religious terms. You mustn't give to the devil what you should give to God. There is something different for the devil. This very prana, this very stock of vital energy, which is actually enough for 800 years, or even more, while we burn it out within a very short period of time. So give it to the devil, share it. It is that silver which is intended for him.
Also, Igor Mikhailovich, you have touched upon such a subject as dopamine. I would like to talk about it because indeed it's actually what the system pays us with, so to say, for what we dream.
It doesn't pay. It lures and holds us with
It
it.
lures us with pleasure.
Of course. We start daydreaming. It doesn't matter. Let's take any plot. For example, you are a hero. I don't know. You help monkeys and knock down bananas with one gaze. That's it. Monkeys are fat. They don't even have to climb trees. They dote on you, and I emphasize, monkeys dote on you. They admire you. You see? It doesn't matter what kind of monkeys those are.
Alpha. You're the alpha.
You are the alpha. All our fantasies boil down to making a person either an alpha or a victim. Doesn't matter. To attract attention. To attract attention even from the objects you have fantasized about. Just imagine. You pay real money to buy an illusion. Let's say you pay money to see a picture of an ice cream or a candy bar. Has it become sweeter for you? Well, this is actually life. You've paid with your life for something dead. Moreover, you have created objects that supposedly invest their attention in you, but it is your attention that is invested, not in you. It is invested in the image that you made up for yourself. It's not you who made it up. It was imposed on you. Again, this point that you made it up for yourself. No, you financed it. None of you makes up anything of that. And that's where the second truth is revealed. We merely finance something that is harmful to us, something that kills us. But it is interesting. Why is it interesting? Because of that very dopamine which stimulates us.
Yes, exactly. It stimulates us to give more time, attention, and energy to
it
that.
sort of stimulates an urges. Yes, exactly. We feel more energetic. It is more interesting to us.
People
you know?
allocate time specifically for those dreams.
Of course. Well, firstly, they dream all the time. Well, for that, it's when they already draw a movie, not a short video, but sort of an alternative life. For that, They always find time, quite a lot at that.
You know, when so much attention is given to a certain scene or that kind of a dream, people suddenly encounter that at some point these thoughts become so intrusive that they come when they are not wanted. You know, it's like.
Wait, when do they come when they are wanted
Or a
if...
person has an illusion of control that he has created a world into which he can escape whenever he wants to.
It's an illusion, and now you have answered. It's an illusion of control. Yet what urges that person to give up everything, give up his family, give up his work and prospects, and sit around
Isolate himself.
and just foolishly dream? An illusion that won't give anything. And you know, it's all of the same nature. Sitting around, watching a TV series, watching a sports program where you are worried or fantasizing. It is absolutely the same. The nature and the essence of these actions are the same. To take away your life. This is really so. It's pointless. Well, you know, now it's a seditious thing. People might argue a little bit as well. It is pointless to watch a TV series that gives you nothing, in which you have worries, in which you don't acquire any skill, you don't develop yourself in any, let's say, applied arts or crafts. Why? What do applied arts and crafts mean? It means you can develop yourself there. If you are an artist, you can draw. That is, you look at how to draw better and how to understand the plot. If you are a writer, you can train yourself in writing. Excuse me, if you are a mathematician, you solve mathematical problems. Okay? You are a metal worker. Whoever, you repair cars. What do you look at? At how to repair. In what case, and what happens in a car? It's a skill. It is needed. In this case, it's understandable you develop as a professional. It is what would enable you to earn a piece of bread and feed your body, right? What for? For your body to function properly. Well, because we have three kinds of nourishment. We are interesting creatures in general. We have prana. If you don't have it, no matter how you feed your body, I'm sorry, but you will die anyway, my friend. That's what gives energy to our body, our consciousness, connections between them, and so on. Prana is the main vital energy for us as humans. Food is the main energy for our body to live. Food and water, this is true. Plus oxygen, you know? I mean, well, let's take that as a unit to feed the body. And there's the most important energy, Allat, which is exactly what personality possesses. And so, if we break it all down into fractions, then Allat is the universal, purest energy that makes up everything. Therefore, such a very remote fraction, mixed with everything, is already prana. Whereas food, is what is left of the processed prana. It has already been processed 1,000 times. And that's the form of energy which we consume as food. However, food does not give that power and that energy so as to, let's say, compensate for prana. No, it's impossible, because prana actually determines our lifespan. And I will emphasize one more thing. Prana plays a huge role in magic, while it is exactly Allat that plays a huge role in life, in gaining life, right? Let's put it this way. Yet, anti-Allat gives tremendous opportunities in magic, because it is the most valuable energy that can be. That is why we constantly chase after this energy. We always want something to eat when we are hungry. Every day, we have to feed our body. Well, some people can surely go hungry for a certain while, but they still want to eat. They still have to feed their body. Prana is also very important, and there are some creatures hunting for it. It also allows them to have advantages compared to the rest of people, whereas Allat is something that is necessary.
In the system, too.
That is important. It initially influences everything, and its most important function is to give life.
Igor Mikhailovich, in such a pursuit of the Allat powers by the system, if the system has studied a human being perfectly well and understands that there are certain triggering situations that arise in his life, and he quickly escapes into fantasizing, can the system create and model a person's external life?
It can't.
So that there are more of such situations in his life?
No, it not just can. That's what it actually does. That is its main function.
Your external life won't get better, but it will only aggravate and such situations which you escape
It
from.
may get better if it benefits the system itself. Why? The system is the main consumer of our attention, our power, and basically of our prana too, you see? But its main purpose and objective is to take away as much of Allat from us as possible. This is not a fantasy, friends. Pay a little bit of attention and observe yourselves. Yet, if you want to know for sure, take any religions and carefully study them from this perspective. And you will find a lot of answers, precisely from practitioners, from those who are, say, like the Holy Fathers in Christianity, right? They speak a lot about the power of attention. And again, about those very images.
Yes, you know,
That's the scariest thing that can be, in fact.
yes.
That's why they warn people and talk about this. Yes, they can call it differently in different religions. Allah is the primordial name. It is the power of God. It is what gives life. You see? Well, it is Allat. We call it as it was called, God knows when. Afterwards, everyone called it by their own name. People established religions based on teachings. They invented, mixed everything, and called one and the same thing by different names. You know, it's like there is prana and chi, right? I mean, in the East, there is si, there is chi, and there is prana. And people call them differently. One energy does one thing, and the other one does another thing. But if we take more ancient times, chi energy is what destroys everything living. Si energy is what we receive with our breath, while prana is what is allocated to us as a reserve of vital energy, and it is almost impossible to replenish it. But it can be taken from another person, and based on that,
Conducts.
of course, there are practitioners who live precisely by this. There are quite a lot of them. This power is being fought for, far and wide. Let's say, all of us fight for attention, don't we? While some people fight for emotion, namely for those states where a person releases prana. There's a simple and classic example, which is described, let's say, by that very Anastasia Novik too. When in the queue, a person begins to quarrel and create an unpleasant situation.
Isnil.
Isnil. Yes, that's right. It is well described in the Azosmos book. Those are hunters for prana. Why? Because a person begins to feel uncomfortable when he sees such people. That starts annoying him and making him nervous. And at this very point, he begins to lose his prana. He doesn't focus his attention on that object. On the contrary. You see? So there are techniques and ways to take away from people not only their possessions and funds, but what is most terrible, to take the energy of life and the energy that gives life. Well,
So energy vampirism is not fiction.
it's not a fantasy. This is really true. It's enough to monitor. I'm just saying, that is, you see, the problem is that we are now talking about the things that we cannot touch. We cannot take some device and measure them. And since we cannot do that, science denies it. However, science cannot do a lot of things. And it has invented so much to justify itself that, you know, it is sort of, we can laugh at it too. So to say, we will not raise this topic.
Distrust science.
Yes, distrust science. We will not raise this topic.
There are many grounds.
There are a great many grounds. Believe me, we have very, very many of these grounds. They are objective, and they can be proved in many, many aspects and branches of science. Let's put it so. While here, we talk about those things where science has not advanced yet. We cannot see or measure this, but we can judge it by indirect signs, meaning by the fact and by what happens. Let's say, to this very person, we can already observe the consequence. Well, we surely cannot observe this energy as a cause, but each of us is able to feel it. And it's impossible to mistake it for anything else. If a person feels the power of Allat, excuse me, even if he is almost dead, everything inside him comes alive. Let's put it this way. Yes, it doesn't affect the body. Well,
The power of spirit.
as a side effect, yes, the power of spirit, absolutely right. Allat is the power of spirit. Prana affects the body. It's a different energy. So, my friends, just to have a simple understanding of what prana is and what Allat is, let's say in a simple understanding, okay? Let's take a car. For instance, a gas tank. A gasoline in it is actually prana. The amount poured in the tank, depending on the engine consumption. It also depends on driving, meaning on the skill.
The character.
Yes, the character of the driver, and so on, whether he uses much or little fuel. Anyway, the fuel is just enough to get from point A to point B. And what is Allat? Allat is the electricity that powers all the sensors and all the systems, including the navigator in this car. Just to know where point A, where you depart from is, as well as point B, where you need to arrive. Otherwise, without a navigator, you'll be driving around in circles and will get nowhere. You will remain where you departed from, having used all your prana, or all your gasoline. Well, I believe this way it will be clearer what the difference between these energies is.
Yes, great.
Although they have been known for ages, they have been talked about a lot, but that's a separate topic.
Igor Mikhailovich, I've also been thinking of how dangerous this reverie and daydreaming actually is if we use medical terms. Going back to dopamine once again, if we consider mental disorders, such as schizophrenia, especially if they involve delusions and hallucinations, then pharmacological medications, antipsychotics, are substances that are intended to reduce dopamine in order to block these dopamine receptors in our heads. While it turns out that consciousness constantly stimulates a human for the amount of dopamine to increase.
Of course.
And when you understand that and draw this parallel, this path which seems to start with a single mise-en-scène, then movies follow, and later on you devote more and more time to that, then an obsessive fantasy appears. So this path most likely leads to bipolar schizophrenic disorders, doesn't it?
It starts, yes, of course. But that's if a person already becomes addicted. While in general, this problem starts from an early childhood. I mean, we've already discussed this. Even from 3 months of age, a child is already tuned to negativity, and later on negativity only increases.
It's an important point.
Little children, even if they are 2 years old, think precisely from the position of negativity. For instance, mom has left. It means somebody has stolen her, and a child immediately...
Negative judgments of people's social behavior also. It's very important.
Of course. And what dictates here? Egoism. In reality, a child worries about his mom only as a tool, or, let's say, an object that gives him a chance to survive and protects him. The child actually worries about himself. And that's where these basic skills of fantasizing are formed. At this very point, consciousness catches a person. And further on, the situation gets worse. We have delved into such a topic. I understand that many people are concerned about it, you know? I don't want
to develop it
too much, to raise it, otherwise later on...
But here you have touched upon one more very important point, and I'm very glad that we have touched it. You've said that 3-month-old babies have a certain inclination to negativity in assessing social behavior. Indeed, this is true because... And later on it gets worse. There are a bunch of studies indicating that our consciousness is negative, egocentric, and aggressive. Those people who work on themselves already notice it in themselves, in fact. However, for those people who never worked on themselves,
they don't see that.
There is at least some scientific ground not to trust their consciousness.
No. There is no ground. Science says what you're talking about. This is really true. But every egocentric person who never worked on himself, who doesn't care about God or anything except himself, you see, even if he considers himself a believer and performs everything as instructed, in fact, he's an egoist who hasn't really worked on himself. He won't understand what we are talking about, you see? Why? Because it seems to him that he is doing well.
Then we can go even further.
Go ahead.
If our consciousness,
Right.
or rather, if personality doesn't care whether a picture takes place in reality or not in reality,
Yes.
or it is in fantasies, then there is such an effect as
I emphasize an immature
in an
personality.
immature personality. Then
Yes, the one that is not free, that is controlled by consciousness. It doesn't distinguish.
it explains such an effect as placebo or nocebo.
Yes, it fully explains it 100%. What is placebo or nocebo?
It is when your thoughts, irrational fears, in particular nocebo.
Attention.
Yes, exactly. You invest attention in them and activate.
The power of attention is invested in one point, in one action, and it really happens. If you invest, I'm revealing the whole essence of any magic. Do you understand? If you invest enough power of attention for it to be able to change even the material world, whatever, a situation itself, you will change it. If you have enough power, or rather not power, but the ability to invest the power of attention in a concentrated way in a point in the past in order to change the past, specifically concerning you, my friend, so that your current situation would change, you can do that. The question is different. Is it worth it? Here's a simple question. Do you understand? You won't be able to invest it in the future. Why? Yes, there is an inertial limit. It is about a couple of minutes. It doesn't play a big role. You won't get anything. You won't benefit, but you can invest in the past. You can really change only that which concerns you personally. If, for example, something gnaws at you or something else, and the most interesting thing is that people will say, yes, it's magic. It is magic. You go ahead and take notes. These are real examples. These are the things that have been studied quite well. It is something that, let's say, made people spend billions on these studies. It is what Ahnenerbe and all other institutions searched for. Do you know how much it actually cost, let's say, for Christianity to maintain the Ahnenerbe Institute? Now they will say, it is Hitler's fault. Friends, I haven't made a mistake in my words. If you are interested, dig it up. We won't elaborate on this subject further and prove anything to anyone. You know that many billions of money in gold were invested in that. Why? Because this power exists, and it can do a lot. The question is different. Is it worth applying, and what will you get out of it as a human being? Slavery in better conditions, but you will still be a slave. If a person is spiritually free, he understands that any illusion here, no matter what it is, even, the best, so to say, endorphin fantasy of yours, just the very, very best one, if it is implemented in this material world, it's not worth anything at all. Because the only worthy thing that may be gained here is life eternal. Nothing in this world may be compared to even one sip of heavenly air, as they say. You see? Well, it's difficult to understand if you don't know that, and if you haven't encountered it, especially if you haven't worked on yourself. But if a person worked on himself, if he cultivated love in himself, if he strives for God with all his soul, if his heart is filled with true, genuine God's love, he understands what I'm talking about. Otherwise, it's impossible to understand. I'll put it this way. For those slaves of consciousness, we are simply idiots. Really. We are deluded, retarded people. Well, I don't know, like believers or some kind of crazy sectarians. That is, we fool ourselves. After all, one can fantasize about anything. And look at how their consciousness operates. We could have fantasized that we feel something, because they can also fantasize. And what do they immediately get? Emotion, a surge, a lot of endorphins, they feel good.
Yes, hormones, chemical cocktails.
Right, a chemical cocktail. You can suggest anything to a person, and he will feel that. Friends of mine, that's true. But nobody can replace God's love with any cocktail. If it goes from soul to soul, if you as personality perceive it, it's unrealistic to replace it with anything. This is indeed. We had a video where we said that God is the ultimate high. It is the highest cave that a person can actually, let's say, feel, experience, or I don't even know how to express it. There's a word happiness, right? I would say that compared to God's love, our entire understanding of happiness is nothing. It is dust underfoot. Because what really gives God's love, when it awakens in a person, when he fights for it, day and night, when he really cultivates it and receives a response, that is life. In this case, no hallucinations or fantasies, nothing is needed. However, it doesn't mean that a person is immobilized and loses interest in this life. No, on the contrary, he begins to understand how much the world is rotten here, and how many people are in slavery of Satan, and they don't even understand it, although people are potentially strong. And there's a problem here too. The stronger a person's, let's say, spiritual potential is at birth, well, people are in different conditions. It is indeed so. It doesn't mean that in the past life he was better, worse, or whatever, like the laws of karma, where you are later born in worse conditions. No, let's just say it's a sequence, It's like a tram arrives, and you take the one that has arrived. You shouldn't have died at the wrong time if you don't like the tram you got on. Everything is honest and fair here. So it happens that some people get on a wonderful tram with a huge potential and an enormous amount of energy. I'll put it that way. The conditions are tremendous, but with these very conditions for personality, in a directly proportional way, corresponding conditions for secondary consciousness are also created, and everything is balanced. The starting position is the same for everyone. Whereas afterwards, everything depends on us, our parents, our environment, and our world we are living in. That is why there is such a result. There are a lot of dreamers, a lot of maniacs, and indeed, people degrade to such an extent that if there was a device that could show people what we as people create in our heads, it's terrible. Really terrible. First of all, virtually everyone is a murderer. Almost all are maniacs. They do things in their heads that you won't see in real life. Almost everyone. Meanwhile, in everyday life, they discuss and condemn those who, in their understanding, are 100 times worse than they are. But in fact, people they judge in their life are 100 times less sinful in this life than those who are sinful in their fantasies. And I'll repeat again, it doesn't matter whether it is in fantasies or in life. If it is sinful, it is all sinful. Personality doesn't differentiate if it's a fantasy or a reality, because it gets a picture. As a result, it gets an image of what is happening, or what has happened, or what is yet to happen. So, depending on the picture our personality has received from our consciousness, personality allocates this very Allat power. That is, as energy, as funds. In fact, it is all simple, very simple. But all magic is based on our attention. And it really exists. That's the placebo effect. When people recover from the most terrible diseases, if they believe in it, as they say, yet what is faith? Faith is a huge pie cut off from your life. In other words, it's a huge amount of your focused attention invested in one point. That's what your faith actually is.
But there is also nocebo.
And what is nocebo? What's the difference between...
It is faith in something bad.
Wait, what's the difference between placebo and nocebo? It's exactly the same effect, isn't it? Let's analyze a simple example. Let's say a certain place is created where you should not enter. Otherwise you will die, right? For example, shamans are talking about that and so on. Indeed, if people accidentally enter there, they die, which is confirmed by evidence. There is no radiation there or anything like that, but it's a holy place, and you will die for desecrating it. Well, there are places where you will die immediately. As a rule, no one goes there. And there are other places where you will definitely die afterwards. Well, it's all nocebo.
Yes.
Why? Because
It's just that when
I
you...
won't name that place, but there is a place. No one goes there. It's very scary. All shamans say the locals, not only the locals, even tourists don't go there. Even famous expeditions engaged in research of paranormal phenomena and so on do not go there. Why? Because it is considered to be really a deadly threat, and this place has existed for hundreds of years. Well, my friends and I just didn't know about that when we were young. Indeed, we were not informed. We were walking our way and stayed overnight in a comfortable place. It was such a nice little cave. As travelers, we made a fire, slept through the night, and left. Then after a while, we found out that we were supposed to die there. As it turned out, you see, the nocebo effect. Well, now shamans will say that those were spirits with their fellow spirits who made a fire and cooked kebabs. Well, it wasn't kebabs we cooked, but who cares? They will find arguments to explain. I don't know, why cans are there, for instance. They will make up something.
They will have to find some kind of arguments.
Yes, they will make up something.
It's just that when you understand that your consciousness is negative and that if you don't control your consciousness, you automatically feed the images it forces on you with your attention.
Yes, of course.
Then maybe at least from the perspective of such empirical data and scientific research, it becomes clear to a person that consciousness has to be controlled and thoughts have to be controlled, so that this process wouldn't be automatic.
Of course, it is necessary.
Because, unfortunately, the path where consciousness, this sort of GPS navigator, paves the way, if we look objectively, it is really a person's death, both his spiritual death and his death here in this world.
The futility of existence. It's just that, to be honest, I very poorly understand. No, I understand everything, yet I still don't understand. A person is born in this world. He gets a chance to live, yet he does everything he can to become a subpersonality. After all, everyone is subconsciously afraid of death. Why? Even as personality, because he knows the consequence. He knows what will happen. He understands that this is his only life. Every person has this awareness, unless consciousness erases it afterwards, of course. But if a person even sits down, calms down, ponders and analyzes, he understands it. On the one hand, he feels peace. Personality imparts this peace to him, that everything can be fine, right? After all, personality is in contact with eternity. But on the other hand, there's what's underneath. A person feels hopelessness and torment, what is described as hell. Any person feels, and he realizes that our life is not limited to the physical body, that life begins after we break free from this cocoon, when we become a butterfly. The only question is, will this butterfly live in a cage, or even, let's say, on a laboratory table, or in a beautiful garden? And it will live either forever in a beautiful garden or for a very, very long time in the hands of some maniac lab technician. There's no other way to put it. After all, we all know that. Why are we not guided by this inner feeling? That's what I don't understand, frankly speaking. Yes, consciousness distracts us. Yes, there is a flow, a mass of different information in us. Yes, religions do not use the true knowledge in purity because it is already altered. Too much has been changed and a lot has been lost. Sometimes it's the human factor, or that very factor of consciousness. But the truth still remains. The understanding is still there. Well, how can you trade the alive for the dead? What's the point? You see, that's what I don't understand. This is precisely that very nocebo effect. There's no other way to call it, right? Although, what's the difference between placebo and nocebo? There is none.
Magic.
It's an investment of attention. It doesn't matter what the result is. It is simply an investment of attention. What you wished for, what you believed in, is what you received. Merely that. Isn't it so? In my opinion, it is absolutely so. Many people will ask, I will digress. So what should be done in such a situation? Therefore, I give you advice, my friends. In order not to harm yourself, in order not to get confused in your own consciousness, and not to engage in those fantasies in your head, cultivate love. It is very simple. The one that comes from within. Do not finance empty conversations and empty pictures in your mind. And they say, to daydream. Do not daydream, my friend. If you want something, earn it. Do it, create it. Only weigh whether you really need it or not, and everything will be fine. And invest your attention entirely in gaining life, eternal life, in love, in God's love. Nothing compares to it. And for starters, let's just learn to love each other. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. It's a very important topic. Thank you very much.
It's an interesting and profound topic. And I think if our friends are interested, we will continue this discussion. Thank you very much, friends. Thank you for being with us.